This video covers a topic that is close to my heart: pseudoscience, how it isn't science, and why you need to watch out for it. So what is pseudoscience, and why do I care about it so much? Well, the simple answer is that my whole job is to help people along their journey to knowledge, and pseudoscience is a big wall in the middle of that path. I am an educator because I like to share truths and believe that with this knowledge your life will be better, and you deserve that. What pseudoscience often does is lead you down a path that ends with you doing something harmful to yourself or others, thinking that you are doing something based in truth. How does pseudoscience do this? Well, it might be an innocent mistake of a scientist working alone with faulty equipment or leaning heavily on their own bias without knowing it. But science catches this. When those findings are published, the hypothesis will weaken and either lead to cool new discoveries or be abandoned. But look, it sucks to have all your hard work thrown out by your peers. The problem is that if a scientist won't abandon their original hypothesis, they may stop using the scientific process. They may start using other methods, like interviewing with Dr. Oz, to help their idea gain traction. Pseudoscience can also be used by people for not so innocent reasons. Someone might want to sell you something or keep you ignorant about something else for their own gain. This is the kind of pseudoscience that drives me the craziest. We will take a look at a few logical fallacies that are often used in this way, and then I will give you a kit full of tools to bust down pseudoscience walls on your path to knowledge. But first, let's get some tools to help us identify if something is science or if it is pseudoscience. Is the claim being advanced by a reliable source? Basically, we're asking, does that person have the expertise to be able to make that claim? Is medical information coming from a doctor or from a politician? Is a new idea in geology coming from a geoscientist or a philosopher? Would you trust me, a geoscientist, if I had told you that I had proven that aliens are real? Before we accept new information, it is important that we believe the source is credible. I don't accept medical findings until I run them past my doctor, and I don't trust science I hear from my friends until I check the original source, unless it's my mathematician best friend telling me about math or big data analysis. It's great to trust some people. You have to, but be skeptical of new stuff. Does this source make the same claim over and over and over again? Are the exact same results being obtained by every single test that they run? Is there room for error? How similar are the findings each time? Now, when you run a test, you're going to get a range of results. You're going to have a lot of data points that you take the average of, and this will help you figure out how close the experimental average is to the hypothesized average. Every time you run a new test, you will get new data points, and the average that you find will be different, but hopefully within that same margin of error. If someone is getting the exact same answer over and over again for decades, never adding any new information or doing any new tests, then this is not science. Remember, knowledge grows. It does not remain static. Even if the hypothesis changes a little bit or new information is added, this can be accepted as science. But if the idea doesn't grow as we learn more, then there's something kind of fishy about it. Have the claims been verified by others? Has this claim been reviewed by experts in that field? And if so, what did they say about it? Did they accept it? If so, yay, happy days. If not, well, then I would be unconvinced. Now, if the person with the claim keeps pushing the idea despite not being accepted by peers, then that is not science. It doesn't mean that the claim is wrong. It just means that most likely it's not right. Okay, the claim might be a smaller part of a bigger picture or part of an explanation that can't stand on its own. Or it might just be flat out incorrect. And there's no way to know without further testing. Now we want to think about how the claim fits into the rest of our scientific knowledge. Is it completely at odds with other findings in its field? If it is, then take a closer look and ask questions before accepting it. Sometimes a breakthrough in science happens, and often it has a very different explanation, but it always builds on the existing knowledge and is consistent with the data in other studies, even if it disagrees with those conclusions. But something that comes out of nowhere, with no other studies or data behind it, you should be extremely skeptical. Remember that the business of science is in trying to disprove things, not prove things. In fact, in statistics, proving the idea is nearly impossible. So instead, we disprove things using data as evidence. So if anyone has used this idea as the null hypothesis, okay, so remember back to the scientific method video, and if so, what was the result? How often have others tried and failed to disprove it? The more often it is not disproven, the more likely it is to be incorrect. The next point is really important. How many data points does a study have? This will be given as the value of a lowercase n in a scientific paper or graphic. The more data points, the more robust the finding. An acceptable value for n depends on the field. In medicine, the n should be at least over 1,000. In geology, we try to make the n as high as possible, but over 50 is the minimum in most cases. If I tell you that aliens are real because I have found alien DNA that uses silica instead of sugars on 2 meteorites from New Mexico, that is much less convincing than if I have told you I have found alien DNA on 200 space rocks from around the world. It's also important to make sure that a scientific claim actually is used or has used the scientific method. Most pseudoscience claims miss one or two principles of the scientific method, which makes them seem a lot like science without really being science. Now, here's something you should ask about anything trying to change your behavior, no matter if it is based in science or not. But a lot of times, these claims use science to make them more credible. Okay, so scientists find that drinking goji berry juice before brushing your teeth in the morning will make you lose a dress size in a week, right? If someone is trying to sell you something, they often tell half-truths, or they're paying a lot of money to unscrupulous scientists to give them the evidence that they want. What is the agenda of the person or group putting the claim out there? Always follow the money to see if there is a conflict of interest. If a pesticide company is fully funding a research lab, I would be very skeptical if their findings are that the pesticide is 100% safe. Does that make sense? It's a little trickier to spot bias in a study, but often when we as scientists are doing a study, we want a certain outcome. Okay, we try really hard not to let that natural human desire for success influence our findings, but I'm sure a little bit of bias creeps into every study. That's why peer review is so important. Everyone has different biases, and if all of these flawed people with all their myriad of biases and faults are finding the exact same thing, well, that's pretty good evidence. We also have something in science called blind and double-blind studies. In a blind study, the scientist gathering the data does not have information about what populations get a treatment and which ones do not, which helps to limit the bias. In a double-blind study, the exact same thing happens, but when the data is sent to a scientist that is running the analysis, they don't know what they're looking for as they run those statistics and analyze the results. Double-blind studies are often the most credible. This list is part of a baloney detection kit that you can use to help you figure out what science is and what is baloney. It was penned by the famous astronomer Carl Sagan in his book, Demon Haunted World. Carl Sagan was a great advocate for science. It's a great read, and if this kind of thing interests you, I would highly recommend adding it to your reading list. Now that we have some quick questions we can ask about claims other people make, we also need to be able to think critically about why we are accepting or rejecting an idea. We are not always right. We can't be 100% right all of the time. That's just not human. So we need to be able to think about our thinking to avoid certain pitfalls that many call logical fallacies. There are a ton of different logical fallacies, but in this video we're only going to deal with 4 of them. The 4 that are the most often the ones that relate to scientific thinking in my experience. If you want to learn more about them, check out the supplemental reading from Western Michigan University. First, the alternative truth fallacy. In this one, we don't accept that there is truth, just different ways of looking at things. Now, this is good because our experiences of the world are subjective, meaning that it has more to do with us than the world out there. However, it doesn't matter how we experience gravity. Gravity exists. It is true whether or not I accept it. If someone says, I don't experience gravity the same way as you, and therefore gravity is only real for you, I can fly, well, what would you say? I would say that's an alternate truth, right? Because you're telling me how you see the world, right? No, I wouldn't say that. I would say, let's run some tests and see if I can disprove you wrong. Alternative facts are dangerous because they first make you question your ability to discern right from wrong, and then try to make you believe or do something counter to what you would have done before getting you confused. The alternate truth fallacy is rampant right now, and it is really easy to find examples everywhere in our country. I just really want to impress upon you the fact that truth is real and the truth is out there. It is extremely dangerous when you have a population that cannot tell the difference between truth and fiction. We have seen dire consequences play out time and time again when the alternative truth fallacy becomes prevalent. The second fallacy I want to call out is the appeal to nature fallacy. This is when you don't question a dubious claim because it reinforces the belief that anything natural is good and anything synthetic or unnatural is bad. Everything on our planet is natural, okay? Fossil fuels are natural products from natural geological processes. Plastic comes from products that we get while refining those natural products. Nothing we have does not come from nature. Okay? Medicines and vaccines are taken from chemicals we find in plants and other natural parts of our world. We just take out the other chemicals in the plants that don't have the effect we want or have a negative effect. If we fall into the trap of believing the appeal to nature fallacy, we might believe that drinking willow tea is better than taking a pain medication that has isolated the pain-blocking chemicals in willow bark and concentrated them. Or something as crazy as thinking that poison ivy is better to eat than a GMO product. Similarly, it will lead you to dismiss any food grown from genetically enhanced seeds as poisonous, even though we have been genetically enhancing crops since we started selectively breeding plants and animals. And that can lead us to dangerous thinking that anything that we see as against the natural order of things are wrong, or that things outside our own personal natural experience are other or bad. Moving on, let's talk about reductionism. This is another fallacy that shows up all the time in our culture. This is when we take a complex issue and turn it into a soundbite. For example, you might see footage of Black Lives Matter protesters and hear someone say that people are just angry. This ignores all of the reasons why they're angry and turns complex issues of racism in the U.S. into an issue of emotional problems. The more widely accepted reductionist stance or a more widely accepted reductionist stance is the Myers-Briggs personality test. I know the test is fun to take, but it's all pseudoscience, just as surely as horoscopes are. All of psychology cannot be broken down into 4 or 5 archetypes. Humans are complex, and personality is the sum of neural processes, physical traits, and experiences. There are thousands of factors that go into who you are. Don't sell yourself short by thinking of yourself as an archetype. You are complex and beautiful. In the same way, you are not only your brain or a sum of the chemical reactions that fuel your body. A famous example of reductionism in science comes from computer science when a student tries to make a model of a cow. In their first attempt, they start with a sphere. A cow is not a sphere. The last fallacy I want to look at is one that I personally have to be the most watchful of. This is when we accept or dismiss new information just because it fits into our existing worldview. If something is surprising to us or counter to our beliefs, then we'll go out of our way to be skeptical and disprove it. But if something gives more credibility to how we're already thinking, we just accept it with little to no questioning. It may not even be obvious when we are doing it. Truth is real, and truth is knowable. Pseudoscience and logical fallacies get in our way of knowing, appreciating, and experiencing the truly beautiful universe we live in. Do not let others take that beauty away from you. Be wary and be skeptical.